Hello, my name is Vid Def Opitz, and I'm a representative of the Intelligence and Security Studies program at Bellevue University in Bellevue, Nebraska. Today I'll briefly be talking about my paper titled Jasmine Spring, Bringing Democratic Change in Islamic Extremism in Tunisia. Now, generally when we hear the words Islamic extremism, the focus goes to Iraq and Syria with their ongoing conflicts amongst other locations. However, relatively little is heard of from Tunisia or other North African states, which is surprising since Tunisia was the focal point for the Arab Spring movement, which engulfed 19 states within the North African and Middle Eastern region. The overall objective of this movement was to remove the authoritarian regimes and the oppressive conservative Islamic governments, and in place putting modernized Islamic democracies, with Tunisia being the only recorded successful transition during this Arab Spring movement. By ousting the former Ben Ali regime, which was surprisingly supported by the U.S. Now, the U.S. did this due to Ben Ali's support of Israel, which is surprising from an Islamic state. However, the U.S. was slow to act on the Arab Spring and the successful revolution, not due to its policies on Islamism, but rather just due to its support of the Ben Ali regime and their support of Israel. The U.S. policy on Islamism was first drafted in the 1970s, with the framework still being utilized today. The basic idea of this policy is that the focus is not on Islamism, as that is not seen as a threat, but rather on the extremism aspect. Now, Islamism and extremism do not correlate. Rather, Islamism is more closely tied to the Western academic definition of instilling a democratic government with a religious Islamic support structure, which is kind of unheard of in the Western side, as especially the U.S., with our stringent policies on separation of church and state. Now, an unintended consequence of the Arab Spring was the Arab Winter, where the remaining states, their authoritarian governments, quelled the uprisings and the revolts with extreme violence. This caused the citizens to essentially go to ground and rethink their strategies, essentially creating various extremist organizations. Each organization was its own entity, however, the overall objective was the same, creating an Islamic State. And these organizations began to work together. And many organizations, again, their own entities, took the moniker Ansar al-Sharia, with located kickers, such as Ansar al-Sharia al-Tunisia AST or Ansar al-Sharia al-Egypt. However, the Ansar al-Sharia aspect paid reverence to al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden with his global jihadist views, as well as his desire for creating an Islamic State. Now, these organizations all began to work together. Many of them were funded by al-Qaeda and the Islamic Maghreb and the other affiliates. But as they began to work together regionally, they paired up with other organizations such as Akhba Abin Nafa Brigade and the Islamic State of Syria and the Levant, with many fighters going to assist in Syria. Now, the Tunisian policy on extremism, which is critically important due to the combination unified front of these Islamic organizations, has been relatively lacking. The newest policy has some gusto to it in its verbiage, however, it has not essentially been put into play yet. There's no direction given. Now, with this minimalist directive, the Tunisian security forces have done quite well at combating extremism by essentially putting AST to ground. However, as the unified front begins to move more so west, their porous borders are going to start being a very real issue, more so than it already is. Now, the U.S. policy on extremism is quite well known. However, the focus is on the Middle East. Much more needs to be done by the U.S. with its focus on the North African region, especially, again, as ISIL and the other organizations constantly ebb and flow with their operational desires. Additionally, the U.S. needs to adopt a better policy towards Islamism. The aspect of winning the hearts and minds as seen in the Afghan and Iraq wars can definitely be used in this aspect, as by supporting the Islamism movement, the peaceful Islamism movement, this in turn creates less desire and less need for the extremist organizations. As the peaceful movement flourishes, then the desire to host these violent conflicts diminishes. If this cannot be obtained, if continued left unchecked, the gem of the Arab Spring, the democracy in Tunisia, will ultimately fail, and the U.S. will fail in this aspect in this region. Thank you for your time. If there's any questions, please see me after.